Dean Cycon, class of 1975. Dean is a man who is passionate about coffee and the power of commerce to make things right. He started out as a lawyer, working in corporate and environmental law, before launching Dean's Beans to prove that he could make a profit and still buy 100% of his beans at fair trade prices. In an article entitled Organic Growth in the Boston Business Journal, Dean said his business was, in fact, an outgrowth of his work in the late 1980s with the Santa Fe, New Mexico-based nonprofit organization Coffee Kids, Inc., which assists children and families in coffee-growing communities through development projects. Coffee Kids co-founder Bill Fishbein said in the article, "Dean has shown that you can sell the highest quality product, pay the highest price for it, pay for the environmental and social value, and you can still earn a profit."
When I was at Williams in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, I forget when that time. It was a time of social turmoil, kind of like now. And a lot of us were struggling to have a life of meaning and purpose. And I was introduced to social activism. I was introduced to Zen. I was introduced to Asian studies, different ways of looking at the world. Vincent, the political science professor, was also my political science professor, introduced me, and yours as well, that's right, introduced a lot of us to different ways of understanding politics. Williams really expanded my mind. I was a rough-hewn New York City kid who thought he knew it all. I learned a lot at Williams, largely how much I didn't know, from some really great people, including John Usden, who's in the audience right here somewhere. There he is. You can't get away from it, John. You taught me a lot, and you're responsible for where I am now, so think about that. And John sent me to Japan. After leaving Williams, I went to Japan to teach English because I knew that there were different ways of thinking and different ways of living that I had studied, but I wanted to see what it really looked like out there. So I took a 2-year odyssey after Williams in Japan, in Thailand, in India, turning cow manure into methane gas, in Iran before the revolution, working on a UN project. I worked my way around the world to experience the cultures that I had studied here and was so excited about. When I came back, I knew I wanted to participate in positive social change, and the first thing that came to me is I want to go to law school, because that was the vehicle that I thought was the way to do it. And I don't dismiss it. Going to law school and using law as a vehicle for social change is a marvelous thing. But if you pardon the pun, I didn't have the Constitution for it. No offense, Judge, you know what I'm talking about. I just couldn't handle the paperwork. I couldn't handle the posturing of the other judges. Excuse me, not the judges, they were great. the other attorneys, and it just wasn't for me. And I thought, well, gee, if this isn't going to work, what do I do here? Do I just bull through and do this because it's the right way to do things, or do I find something that sings to me? And I started to find that if I went instead of with my head, but with my heart and soul, I would find the path that was right for me. So I let go of the preconception of what I had to be, and I started to look at who I was. And so I started to do work while I was still a lawyer on Wall Street. I started to do volunteer work with anti-nuclear groups, which led me into indigenous rights groups as I started to get deeper and deeper into understanding the nuclear cycle and the issues of the environment, which led me to start working with environmental groups, Greenpeace and a whole bunch of others at the time. That then led me into doing overseas work with indigenous peoples, which then became my passion for years. And still as a lawyer and as a social activist and an organizer. Then all of a sudden, an opportunity came along, and I co-founded a nonprofit organization called Coffee Kids to do development work in coffee villages around the world. And since 99% of the people who grow coffee are indigenous peoples who generally don't speak the dominant language, all throughout Latin America, I work with people who don't speak Spanish. All throughout Africa, Ethiopia, and Kenya, I work with people who don't speak Amharic or Swahili. They don't understand it at all. They speak their languages. They're so marginalized, even from the dominant cultures that we see in the newspaper. They're so far down there that they're not even served by their own state. They're really out there. And Eugene certainly knows what I'm talking about. He works with the same populations in Mexico that I do. Indigenous peoples. So that started to become a passion, and Coffee Kids was the first development organization to focus on coffee. My role in Coffee Kids was to create the programs. Since I was coming from a background of community work with indigenous peoples, not top-down development work, I wanted to do a different model. And so we created what's called in the trade people-centered development, which is a community-based model which starts in the community. Things are designed by the people who are the recipients of the work. So I started that back in '88 and did that for many years, and we would get money from the coffee companies in the world to do this great work in the villages. And one day I was sitting there when a little well was being inaugurated in Guatemala, and I thought, wait a minute, this village is getting this well, that's really good. The company paid $5,000 for that. They're getting all this advertising. They're getting much more than $5,000 worth of advertising out of this, and nothing's changing. They haven't changed their business practices, which is what's keeping all these people in a constant state of underdevelopment for centuries. Now, the state governments also play a role in this. I'm not just blaming multinationals. A lot of players in why there's poverty in the world, and it's not just us. I know there's a tendency to think we do all the bad, but there's plenty of blame to go around. So anyway, I came to realize that this wasn't working. This is good charity, but it wasn't social change. So I thought, well, what would it look like if these companies that bought from these villages actually took responsibility to a degree for the conditions that they find where they're buying their products? All the companies that were claiming we're true partners with these people, what does a partnership look like? How do you act with a partner? If they ask too much money or they're suffering from a flood, do you walk away from them? Is that how you treat a partner? So I decided that I would try to develop a company, and I was not a business person. But I had a Williams education, so I could do anything I wanted to do, couldn't I? Or at least talk my way out of it, right? So anyway, I started a company, and the company was going to be my highest values. I would use it as a vehicle for progressive social change, and frankly, as a spiritual tool for me to manifest my highest values. The stuff that I learned here that's sung to me, and now I had a chance to manifest it instead of reading about it and talking about it. So I created this company, and that was 15 years ago. And the premise of the company was that we would show up with our highest values wherever the decision was. So what that meant in the third world was we would only do organics because I know what pesticides do in the third world. Remember, the farmers can't read, right? They can't read the pesticide warnings. Pesticides are a disaster in the third world. The next thing would be fair trade, and that means basically that although the free trade model provides pricing that goes up and down, can drive people off their land or give them something to live on, it's not reliable. And free trade doesn't really apply to coffee because free trade theoretically is about you, the buyer, and you, the seller, at an arm's length transaction having equal bargaining power in a sense and coming to an agreement that benefits both of you. That's the theory, the Adam Smithian theory. That I learned at Williams about free trade. But that's not what coffee's about. In the world of commodities, the price of coffee is determined by a board of men, over-caffeinated young men in New York City. In New York City, who bid up and down the price of coffee, just like the price of oil is going up and down now, not based on the cost of production, the need of a farmer to feed his family, or to have a decent life or put his kids in school, but strictly on the float between making pennies on the profit. That's the free trade model applied to coffee, and it's not free trade. And I'm sure there's nobody, including my dear friend Susan, who would agree. That's not really what free trade is all about, but it's called free trade. So in the fair trade model, in commodities, it's a direct relationship. I work in 14 countries. We have direct relationship with cooperatives in each of those countries. Those cooperatives are doing great jobs for their communities, and we work with them both technologically, politically, and every other way we can to help them achieve their goals of community good. On top of that, I applied the Coffee Kids model to this because pricing is never enough. I remember when prices were over $2, $3 a pound for coffee green, and at the crisis level, they were at 35 cents a pound, so it kind of shows you the swing it can go. Even when the farmers were getting $2 or $3 a pound, nobody was driving new cars. Poverty does not get changed by quick price changes, regardless of what the economic modelers will tell you. So we felt we needed to go a step further to integrate our business into the lives of the people that we do business with. And so we took our people-centered development model from Coffee Kids and brought it right into our business. And what that means is every cooperative that I deal with and buy from, besides paying fair trade, besides organics, besides the activism, we also do people-centered development projects in all of those communities. What does that mean? The farmers tell us what their priorities are, what they want to do, how they want to achieve a higher level of standard for their community. In Ethiopia, we have a mind-blowing program called Miriam's Well, building wells in Ethiopia. because the Millennium Development Goals identify water as a big issue. Every community in Ethiopia says we need clean water. Well, right now, 3,000 farmers and their families around Ethiopia are getting clean water for the first time in history through our program, which means, what does that mean? That means that every day women don't have to walk 1.5 miles downhill and carry 40 pounds of water back up, 3 hours of labor free today. That means that the kids, within a month of our starting those wells, the stomach problems disappeared, and the kids no longer have amoebic dysentery and diarrhea, which means they can go to school and they can concentrate. So the simple act of clean water has this profound meaning to people's lives. In Guatemala, we work with women's health care programs, and I'm proud to say my wife and my daughters are working with me. Next generation, that's really great. Women's health care, we created the first self-funding women's health care program in the world with 44 indigenous women who were illiterate. They became a totally self-funding health program over 5 years. Mind-boggling stuff. They designed it, we co-designed it with them, we funded it from our profits, not looking for funds, because this is our business model. They survive, we survive. We rise together. We're a profitable company. After 15 years, we're still growing 20% a year. We're still profitable. And not many people know us in the United States, but I can tell you, when we walk into Papua New Guinea, Ethiopia, or any of the other 14 countries we're in, we're known, loved, and respected. And to me, that's my manifestation of the values that took root here at Williams. And we're a work in progress, by the way. I don't claim that we have the answer, because I believe that process is more important than any formula, whether it's a fair trade formula or a free trade formula. It's a process. Look at it, re-examine it. Is it really meeting the needs of the people? Is it really meeting my professed values? If not, let's rock and roll, change it, and raise the bar a little higher. So that's what we do. And that, as I said, the seed was planted here, I'm very proud to say, here at Williams College. And I just hope that we can carry on. Now, I have a gift for you all. When you go outside, there's a big coffee bowl, and in it are chocolate-covered coffee beans, which I'm calling today Williams Study Aids. So they're organic, fair trade chocolate, organic, fair trade coffee. They're not for sale anywhere. Just go out there, eat them, study hard, live your values, never give up, and keep raising the bar. Thank you very much.